Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Golf, a bi-weekly podcast featuring experts in the industry about all things golf. I'm your host, PGA professional Mark Guttenberg. This week's guest is PGA member Roger Hatcher. Roger is a Master Clubfitter and golf instructor at the 1757 Golf Club in Sterling, Virginia. He has been ranked by Golf Digest as one of the top 100 clubfitters in the United States. Roger is also an accomplished player, having won the 2005 Maryland Senior Open and the 2008 MAPGA Senior Tournament of Champions. We'll talk with Roger about coming into the PGA for a successful career as a home builder and how he progressed along the way to becoming a top club fitter. And we'll learn what goes into being fit for a set of clubs and a whole lot more. By the way, folks, this episode is brought to you by TaylorMade Golf. I gotta tell you, I just got my M1 last week. I love that thing. I'm killing it. I'm hitting fairways. I'm hitting it longer. The adjustability is awesome to take spin off or put more on, whatever you want to do. It's a great club. It's really hot. Go ahead and get yourself an M1. Well, welcome to the show. I tell you what, I really love doing this show because I get to bring in people from all walks of life in the golf industry. Teachers, players. Today we have somebody very special who's kind of a one-size-fits-all. This guy does it all. He teaches the game, he plays the game, and he's one of the top 100 club fitters in the United States as Golf Digest has ranked him. I have my good friend, Mr. Roger Hatcher. Roger, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Roger, it's great having you on this show because club fitting is something that I think a lot of people really don't understand. So we're going to have a chance today to pick your brain, get into some of the things that people need to know when they go to get a set of clubs. But before we really get into that, Roger, you know, your journey to become a golf pro has sort of taken a circuitous route. How did you go from building homes, electrical contracting, to building golf sets and becoming a golf pro?
Well, I was an athlete first, at a very young age, starting at about 10, 11 years old. I played one sport or another every day of my life. Then had some success in high school, college, and always knew in my mind that some way, some shape or fashion, I was going to be in an athletic endeavor. Apparently I wasn't quite good enough to play professionally, but I had some mentoring from my mom's cousin, who's a lifetime PGA member, and when I started...
What was his name?
Bill Maloney.
Bill Maloney.
He was the head pro for 28 years at St. Andrews in Yonkers, New York, which is the oldest course in America. And he encouraged me that if I was going to change careers, I should go to golf. And at the time, I didn't play. And his words of wisdom were, well, you're going to have to learn how to teach and do something special related to golf in order to make a living at it. So first learn how to play. At that time, 35 years ago, club fitting was hardly exist. You know, it really didn't exist. If you wanted a set of golf clubs, you bought a set of golf clubs.
That's true. You know, Roger, you make a really good point about that. Back in the day, we didn't have the technology we had. I remember, you know, when I grew up watching guys on tour, before club fitting was really big, one guy comes to mind is George Archer. Mm-hmm. George was like 6'4" and didn't have clubs to fit a 6'4" guy. What he did was he fit his body to the club instead of the club to the body. And that's really what you're all about, isn't it? Making sure that the golf club, that piece of equipment in your hands, fits your body and you're not trying to adjust to that. Is that an accurate statement?
It's just absolutely spot on. A lot of people feel that they're not good enough to get fit for golf clubs. And, you know, I might mention, well, do you try shoes on before you buy them? Do you try your shirts on? Club fitting is no different. Getting the right size golf clubs, the proper length, the proper weight. And then there's other characteristics that we would look for that would help somebody play better golf.
Okay, before I get into the actual club fitting experience, What on your journey? What are some of the jobs you've had in the past before you evolved into Golf Digest Top 100 Club Fitters? Where did you work in the business?
I started initially at Northern Virginia Golf Center just to show up and get around the game. That's what my mentor, Bill Maloney, had said, that first you have to be around the game. And so I showed up and told him I would do whatever was necessary to work at the facility. Made good friends with Marty O'Rear, a longtime PGA professional. And when he got the head pros job at Cedar Crest Country Club, he said, Roger, you got to come to work for me. And I said, well, I really don't know much about the golf business. And he said, no. He says, but you've run other businesses. I need your help in managing the staff and everything. I'll teach you what you need to know about the golf business. So that was the first place, Evergreen Country Club. After that, then Hidden Creek Country Club as director of instruction. Back to Evergreen for a short stay, and then to 1757 Golf Club, where I started doing more and more club fitting, even though I had club fit all along, but without the technology that we have today, it was a completely different endeavor than it is now.
Really is. So that's a great history of where you came from, and then you really started to shine as a club fitter when you went to that 1757 job. That's when you started getting a lot of notoriety. I started sending a lot of my clients in your direction. And tell us, as you go in for a club fitting, whoever you are, what do they get in a club fitting? Walk us through the process and what can they expect.
Well, the first thing we'll do is I'll have them obviously warm up just like you're getting ready to play around the golf. We will then test their equipment, and that way we get some baselines and some numbers. I'll go through an interview process to find out how often they play golf, how often they practice. Do they take lessons? If they take lessons, what do they in their pro tend to work on? A lot of times that is, if their pro is working on something with them and they're working on it and they can't achieve it, that usually tells me something's wrong with the golf clubs. We look for, do they hit the ball too high, too low? Do they hook the ball too much? Do they fade the ball too much? Most of the pros in the area, they're doing the right thing. But sometimes the clubs are just really keeping the player from being able to do what the golf pro is asking them to do.
Well, and that's a really good point, because a lot of times when I'm giving someone a lesson and they want a new set of clubs and they say, well, should I go for my club fitting tomorrow? And they just came to me for lessons. And this is a very important point. I usually tell them to hold off. For instance, when you're doing a club fitting, and we're going to talk about the different stages of it, and somebody comes in and they're hitting a shot and you've got a lie angle board down there and it shows that they're coming in 3 degrees upright on every single swing. But as a teacher, which what makes you a better club fitter is you are a teacher too, you see them coming over the top. You see it's the swing flaw that's creating the 3-degree upright position. Do you try to fit to that 3-degree upright position, or do you say, hey, if you and your pro are working on this, the readings we're getting are not the readings we're going to get? How do you approach that?
Well, and that's part of the interview process. When somebody comes in and I ask them how often they play, and they say 5 times a year. Do you take lessons? No. Do you practice? No. At that point, it's going to be a total compensation fit. Whatever we have to do to help them enjoy the game a little bit better is what we're going to do.
And they're going to be over the top all day.
They could, they could be losing their posture during the swing. That person and that's one of the enjoyments, where a lot of times, as you know, as a teacher, you can give the guys really good stuff, but if they're not going to work at it, they're not going to get any better. So we can help people in that situation. The player, when somebody says, well, my pro and I are working on getting rid of that over the top move. Well, sometimes if the equipment is really wrong for them, too hard to square up, lie angles are off, too heavy of shafts, Sometimes, like in the woods, some models are just so much tougher to square up than others, particularly when you combine it with the wrong shaft. Sometimes we can help them quite a bit there. Usually in lie angles, when I see the lie angles are off significantly, now it might be off because of their swing is making it off. I don't believe in a total compensation for people who are working on their game, particularly when they are getting good instruction at the same time. But we might be able to give that somebody some help to make it a little bit easier to square the club face up, so he has a little bit easier job when he attacks from the inside of not worrying, because trying to do two things at once, because if you change your attack angle, then you usually have to change, or your club path, you have to change your face angle at the same time. So sometimes we can give them a little bit help, make it easier for the teacher to get them to do what they're trying to do. But I don't, it would be a mini compensation, but then as they make a little bit better swing, they should get a little bit better result. But if we give somebody all the help they need in squaring the club face up, get that lie angle up, it's really not going to be long-term the best thing for their swing development.
So that's a good point. You fit the flaw if they're not going to really work at it. If they're working on making a change, you take that into consideration in the fit. Now, when you do a fitting, or I know when I do a fitting, and I'm certainly not at the level you are, I consider four things. I consider the length of the club, the lie angle of the club, the flex of the shaft, and the size of the grip. What am I leaving out in a Roger Hatcher club fitting?
Probably the biggest thing, and this is what the launch monitors are invaluable, is testing the results. Do we hit the ball high enough to get playable trajectory? Some players who hit down on the ball harder and trap it more aggressively, they might have a relatively low launch, but the spin could be high enough to stop the golf ball. There's many ways to play the game. So if somebody has a really high launch angle, they might not create as much spin, but will the ball stop? So when you're looking at playable trajectory is one thing that most golfers don't understand. When I explain it to them that, hey, we only want to hit that green once. So when we hit it, we need to have either enough spin or enough height to stop the shot. That also gets into when would I recommend somebody switch to a hybrid, which is a little bit easier to get up in the air, is going to stop a little quicker. Their total set makeup is one thing that we look at. What degree differential do we need in lofts on their wedges? How I know you over the years, you always hit the ball high enough that I doubt if you've ever had a lob wedge in your bag because you didn't need it.
Well, I have one, but I was one of those guys that was kind of against it because it kind of gave people an advantage to do something I could do with a lower lofted club. But I have one.
Okay.
Hey, if you can't beat them, join them. Right?
And those are the type of things you're looking at, just like the moderate speed players. And this is one thing that's really surprising. Everybody who comes to me, they want a whole set of golf clubs. If somebody's not hitting a drive 240, 250 yards, realistically, there's no chance they need 14 clubs in their bag. My goal is, if at all possible, is I'm going to save them enough money that the money that they paid me for a club fitting, they're going to save by buying the right amount of golf clubs and clubs that they're not going to have to replace anytime soon.
Yeah, you cut two clubs out of their bag. That could be $400 savings right there.
And it's usually an expensive golf club. And what I'm saying that is the 3 woods, unless you have tons of club head speed and hit the ball on the high side, I'll find that most people that's a club that they really don't need. I've lost enough speed over the years that if I didn't have 16.5 degrees of loft on my 3 wood, I wouldn't be able to get it airborne. And I still don't carry. I have no difference in how far I carry the ball for my hybrid, my longest hybrid versus my fairway wood. It's going to roll out a little bit better, and that's basically it. But most people, they can't get the less lofted golf clubs airborne to even have a 3-wood and sometimes even a 5-wood. I've got some really good players that 7-wood is the longest fairway wood they have in their bag.
Wow, that's interesting. A lot of people don't understand the terminology that you guys talk about, that we talk about when we talk about bounce, we talk about lie angle. I'm going to throw some definitions at you in a minute here that maybe you can clarify for us. But just one thing I'd like to have you talk about is, why is lie angle so important?
Lie angle helps control where the ball goes.
And then talk about, how would you define what lie angle is for somebody listening that has no clue?
Lie angle is if you sole a club on the ground, what angle is the hosel at, so that a club that is be more upright, the toe would be coming up in the air, flatter, the toe would be more down. It helps control where the ball goes. Generally, a more upright lie angle is going to help the person square the club face up. A flatter lie angle is going to keep it from going left. The one thing that I want to make sure of in lie angle testing is that, the most important thing is, if the person hits the ball first and the ground second, where's the ball going? If I need to make a set of golf clubs upright to make sure that they can square the club face up, I will check and use the lie board to make sure that mark is still in the middle of the club head or minusculely toe side. Personally, when we have the lie angle on the inside of the golf club or towards the heel, that person will have zero chance of playing successfully out of the rough. And this is where most of the people, and this is something I've learned talking to the club fitters who work with the touring pros, they want their lie angles pretty much to be slightly on the toe side every time, because they know that even those guys are going to hit the ball in the rough. If somebody needs a lie angle to square the club face up to where the mark moves too much towards the heel, then we might be looking at a lighter shaft. I might look at their grip. That's the very person I'm going to give them a little bit of help, maybe in a lie angle, but then it's their pro's job to get that club to square up, because if we let the mark go to the heel side, it's going to be horrendous out of the rough, because we have something already on the heel side of the club, which is the hosel.
Yeah,
and
I knew that was coming.
That's going to catch the grass.
Well, Roger, that's really important stuff, and I think that people have a misconception that height really determines lie angle, because you would think somebody very short and close to the ground is going to have a flatter lie angle, and somebody hugely tall would be very upright, but it depends on the length of their torso, depends on the length of their limbs. There's so many factors that you can't just look at somebody and say, like they used to do, you walk in the store, all right, he's 6'1", give him standard, stiff shaft, whatever. You have to really measure the dimensions of their body, don't you?
You have to measure the dimensions of their body, but then you also have to dynamically fit them.
Exactly.
Because if, we'll have some tall people with long arms, short people with short arms, just their normal delivery style. Your point exactly. I'm almost 6'5". I play clubs that are a little bit longer than standard. They're about 3/4 of an inch longer than standard, but I hate hooking the golf ball. And I have developed a swing that comes from the inside. And so I have my lie angles 2 degrees flat, where people are just, amazed at that. But I have no problem squaring the club face up, and using that to my advantage, so I don't have to work from keeping the ball going to the left.
That's awesome, and that's what those guys on tour have that the average golfer doesn't have. They've got somebody they can go to and say, I don't like my ball flight today. Let's kind of go with a set of clubs that can help alter that. Even, for different events, if they need to hit it high versus low, they'll actually change clubs. Okay, Roger, I'm going to throw some terms at you that maybe just you can give us some quick definitions, things that people hear a lot but have no idea what it means. And we're going to start with bounce. What is bounce?
Bounce is what's on the bottom of the golf club to keep it from sticking in the ground.
Is it on every golf club?
There is bounce on every golf club.
Okay.
That's a very deceiving thing, where I had a customer one time who with his wedges had very, very low bounce, and yet when we were fitting his irons, I saw he had a fairly steep angle of attack. And when I looked at his wedges, I said, we really need to go down to the wedge range and try some different bounces on your wedges. And he said, no, I don't like those bouncy things. Well, he had 4 and 7 degrees on his wedges, which is very, very little. When I explained that that's very low bounce, he goes, no, that's a lot more bounce. Of course, his pitch and wedge and 9-iron didn't have any number on the bottom, so he thought they had 0 bounce.
What does bounce do for a golf club?
Bounce keeps the club from sticking in the ground.
Okay.
The leading edge of the golf club, if it gets too engaged with the turf, we're going to have that club just skid to a halt. Our divots are going to get steeper and steeper. We're trying to keep the club from digging in the ground when we take a divot.
Okay, good. I'm going to just run through some of these now. What about torque? What is torque versus, say, flex?
Okay, flex is the overall flexibility of the shaft. Torque is the resistance or help in the shaft rotating or twisting. So during the downswing, the weight of the club, since it's off center, it's going to twist slightly open and it's going to twist slightly closed. A lot of torque will allow that to happen more often or to a greater extent. Low torque will tend to minimize that. There is no right or wrong to where people say, oh, I'm a really high-speed player, I need low torque. It's all just on how that person times his hit, and tempo and rhythm can take part in what they might need, but if we're not testing, we're guessing. There's no rhyme or reason why one person would play with a softer torque or a higher torque shaft.
Okay, good. So quickly on this one, kick point.
Kick point. That's where the shaft flexes. The lower it flexes, the tendency is going to be to have a higher ball flight. Down by the closer it is to the hosel, the higher the ball flight, the more it's towards the handle, the lower the ball flight.
Got it. Now, what does it mean if somebody's club has been tipped stiff?
They, within a set of golf clubs or shafts, you can increase the stiffness of a shaft by tipping it down at the skinny part. So most of the pros will have their drivers tipped anywhere from 3/4 to 1.5 inches. Usually it tends to give you a little bit more control, but it's not always easy to get airborne or square the club face up, but there's not many pros that have a problem with that.
So if it's tipped stiff, it's a little stiffer than a regular stiff, almost an extra stiff.
There's 3 steps. You could take a stiff flex shaft and you could hard step it once, which would make it a little bit stiff, hard step it twice. The third time you hard stepped it, you might as well go to an X flex because it's going to be the same flex. But you can make slightly softer, slightly stiffer to really fine tune that shaft.
That's good stuff, and I love all this terminology. Okay, now here's a question I think a lot of our listeners have, and I certainly have it, and you've certainly done it. But at what point does a senior switch shafts, and what are the determining factors? For instance, is it just a club head speed thing? I know that sometimes guys with slower club head speed can hit the ball farther than guys with faster club head speed. It just depends on a lot of factors there. But how do you get to the point? What is I know you switched to graphites from steel. So I'm 64 years old. I'm still playing the same specs I did when I was 24 years old. 1 degree upright, 3/4 inch long. I'm a high ball hitter, so I set my lofts 2 degrees strong. Usually just a regular stiff, even though it's softer because it's longer. So at what point do I look at this and say, you know what, I'm not getting the best out of it?
That depends. And that's probably the fail-safe answer I have. Everything related to club fitting, it really does just depend. It depends. Are you having trouble hitting the ball high enough to where you might have to go to a lighter shaft? Mm-hmm. Usually the lighter the weight, the easier it is to get the ball up in the air. For my purposes, and this would be pretty much, and I had to really work hard to fit myself the way I would fit a customer rather than what my ego wanted. I'd lost a lot of club head speed. I had ruptured a disc in my back, and I just didn't have enough club head speed to hit the ball far enough. I've always been a relatively low ball hitter, so I needed something to kick the ball up in the air, and so I went to a 65-gram graphite shaft. It is stiff and flex, but I had to do that to get the ball high enough in the air to go anywhere. Along with that, I went to a more game improvement iron that has actually a little bit stronger loft, but that gave me a little bit more ball speed. A lot of times we'll find that if we can increase the ball speed enough, even though the launch angle isn't ideal, if the ball continues to rise for a longer time period, it will eventually reach a much higher trajectory down line, and that can help the person stop the golf ball. That's why touring pros launch the ball considerably lower than the average golfer, but they have so much ball speed because of how solid they hit it, and they tend to be high-speed players. The ball continues to rise for a longer time period, so it gets plenty of height down range, even though the launch angle is initially lower.
Wow. So that's a lot of stuff, and the average person says, you know what, I'm just going to go to Roger and let him figure all this stuff out, because, that's the other thing is the shaft, it's really the heart of the club. I mean, that's what makes one club feel really great versus another, and there's so many choices out there. You got to go to somebody like Roger. I mean, I'm a club fitter, but I'm a teacher, but it's not my full-time gig, meaning that I can give you a good club fitting. I can, like the average pro, we can tell you what your lie angle and your length should be, but if you really want the best fitting, go to an expert that knows all the latest shafts on the market, that can tell you what's best for you. One of the myths in golf, and Roger, you and I have discussed this before, is making a club longer, which will guarantee you'll increase your club head speed, but will it really make you hit the ball farther? Your thoughts?
It depends. Now, the biggest thing relative to how far the ball is going to go, the first thing you have to start with, and Mark, you made the comment earlier that just because somebody swings the golf club faster doesn't mean it's going to go any further. The first thing we start with is solidness of contact. Is that shaft the right length that's going to give the person the best chance to make solid contact? As far as the flex of the shafts, a lot of that is feel. So some of the different shafts, if a person is swinging a golf club, the shaft has got to feel good. It's got to be a tool that they have confidence that they can hit the ball in the right direction. But as far as the length of the golf club, many times a shorter shaft, particularly in a driver, they'll make so much better contact, and they also feel like they can control the ball better, that they might amp their speeds up based on the fact that they feel like they're going to control the ball better. And so a longer driver shaft a lot of times actually hurts their distance.
That's so true. And didn't Ricky Fowler just recently go to a shorter driver, and he didn't lose any distance? In fact, he picked up some, I think.
Well, the touring pros, and I'll ask, particularly when I'm measuring, because I'll measure everybody's golf clubs. I measure the stiffness, I measure the length, and I'll make a comment. Wow, this your driver shaft is 1.5 inches longer than most of the touring pros play. And I'll ask them, do you know why they play with shorter shafts? And invariably it's, well, they hit the ball far enough, they don't need that. Well, they actually play that shaft because they're going to hit it further. They're going to make better solid contact, and we'll find that very, very true with the average golfer. Length of iron shaft as well. If you lose your posture during the swing, every teacher will tell you that if anything, you would want to go down a little bit through the hitting zone, never up and out of it. And too long an iron shaft is going to be a recipe for disaster.
Well, that's very, very good stuff. So I think it's important, like you said, it's all about the squareness of contact. If a longer club gives you more speed, but you're hitting it on the toe or the heel, you're going to lose distance. So, again, another good reason to go to Roger. Nowadays club fitting is really gotten high tech with all the launch monitors and things out there. I wouldn't attempt to do a club fitting without some kind of TrackMan or flight scope, because you just have real data. Now you have stuff that says, man, I got 10 more miles an hour club head speed with this one, or my launch angle with this one wasn't as good, or my spin rate changed just because of that. We used to just, oh, that one felt good, I like the way that one looked. I mean, imagine now. So do you prefer, we only have 1 or 2 more minutes here to go here, but do you prefer TrackMan or flight scope?
I prefer TrackMan. It gives me more detailed stuff. One thing that, and software eventually is going to get up there, but TrackMan has a really good feature in the newer versions. It will allow us to take all the numbers and tell us what the ball would have done at 0 wind and whatever temperature we want. If we're hitting into a wind and the person's used to having his driver go 260, even though his driver that day is only going 245, it's really good for the customer to feel that we're getting legitimate as to what he's going to expect out of it. So if it basically takes the information and tells us what would happen under normal conditions. Our studio faces northwest, so during the winter, I would have a tough time selling a driver if every time we hit the ball, it's going 40 yards less than what it would under normal conditions.
Well, very informative stuff, Roger. You've given us a lot to chew on. I wish this was an hour show because I could pick your brain forever. Just a couple of parting questions here. How many club fittings would you say you've given at 1757?
Oh, I would have a tough time
in the thousands. Got to be well in the thousands.
The thousands might be within a year and a half.
Wow, that's amazing. To say I've done over 40,000 golf lessons in over 40 years. That's a lot, doing 1,000 lessons a year. But club fittings go a lot more now that they're available. It's easy to stay busy doing that. And Roger, you do a great job at that. You're not only a great player. He's won the Maryland Senior Open before. He's been the Middle Atlantic PGA Central Chapter Senior Player of the Year. Is that right? Or
no?
You won the Central Chapter Senior Championship.
I won the Tournament of Champions for the senior.
You get it. He's a good player.
Decent player.
He's a good player. He's got a little bit of my money to prove it too. So, Roger, give us an idea how our listeners can go about reaching you for a club fitting session. What your rates are, if you care to share that at this point. If not, just tell them how we can get in touch with you.
Okay, you can get in touch with me at 1757 Golf Club. The telephone number is 703-444-0901. and extension 6, and that will take you to the Golf Academy number, and they can book that. You also could go online, and you could book online. That would be, you'd have to go through sort of the instruction part, the actual club fitting part. They don't have that link. That would be the best way. My rates, I charge $150 the first time I see somebody. I charge $135 the second time. I give people a 10% discount on my time, and the sessions usually last an hour.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Let me tell you, it will be well worth your investment and your time. I think golf lessons are great, but if you're using equipment that doesn't fit you, sometimes we're trying to fix problems we shouldn't have to fix. Go see Roger at 1757. Well, good buddy, thanks for coming on my show. I love talking to you. We got to get back out on the links now.
My pleasure, Mark. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you.
See you later.
Well, that concludes another episode of Let's Talk Golf. I don't know about you, but I learned a lot from Roger and why it's worthwhile going to an experienced club fitter. I hope you enjoy our show and will rate us and write a review on iTunes as well. If you have any ideas, feedback, or suggestions, just hit the Contact Us tab on my website, Guttenbergsgolf.com. That's Guttenbergs golf.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of Let's Talk Golf.